Alrighty, well, good evening, everyone, and welcome to our Unity Through Diversity panel. In case you don't know, my name is Ellie Confirst, and I'm a senior at Roosevelt High School, and I will be your moderator this evening. Before we begin, I just wanted to give you a little bit of background as to why this panel is even happening in the first place. The Pew Research Center explains that Americans today are more polarized right now than at any other point in American history, and students are starting to feel the effects of that. But when we actually sit down and talk to each other, either inside or outside of the classroom, we've come to understand that we agree on a lot more than we disagree. Now, this forum's not a debate. No one's going to leave here a winner or a loser. The entire point of it is to have a conversation, a way to understand where we're all coming from and how that shapes the way we see the world. With that in mind, let's introduce our panelists.
Good evening, ladies and gentlemen. My name is Jerry Jones. I'm currently a senior who attends East High School. On the political spectrum, I align myself with the Republican Party. I've been involved in the community in numerous ways, such as volunteering on campaigns and political groups. I'm the president and founder of Young Republicans of Iowa, and I hope you enjoy your evening with us. Thank you.
Good evening, everyone. My name is Robert Shimway, and I'm a senior at North High School. When it comes to politics, I tend to lean on the far left of issues, and I serve as a student member in the Iowa State Board of Education. I volunteer for the Hillary campaign during the end of the presidential election. I also volunteer for the Democratic Caucus, and I just finished volunteering for the Connie Boesen City Council campaign. And so I'm glad that all of you guys are here today, and I'm excited.
All right, my name is Grant Fay, and I am a senior at Lincoln High School, and I identify myself as a moderate Republican. This whole event was my idea, and so I want to thank everybody that's been involved and thank all of you for coming out tonight and supporting us.
Good evening, my name is Maya Miller. I'm currently a senior at Roosevelt High School. First of all, I'd like to thank Grant for organizing this whole forum tonight and for inviting me to participate. I first truly became interested in politics during the 2008 election when my parents took me to my very first caucus. And since then, I've volunteered with my caucus precinct. I've worked on the advertising campaign for the Clinton campaign. And I serve as the Legislative Affairs Chair for a statewide nonpartisan youth policy advising group and have the opportunity to lobby legislators on behalf of Iowa youth.
All right, so now let's talk about some of the rules that we've set up for this evening. The number one rule that everyone in the room needs to understand and follow is respect each other. Despite disagreements, our goal here is fundamentally to understand each other. That means no interrupting, no speaking over each other, no attacking each other personally. If any of that starts to happen, I do reserve the right to take necessary steps to return the panel to civility. Timing-wise, here's how that'll work. The panelists and I have predetermined 12 topics that we'll be discussing tonight, which are all listed in your program. Wait, I lost my spot. Oh yeah, for each topic, two students will give a 1-minute position statement on their beliefs. After those speeches, there will be 5 minutes of open discussion, which will be moderated by me. I'll keep a list of who's spoken and how recently. That way I can ensure everyone gets the equal opportunity to speak. We're on an extremely tight schedule, so with 1 minute remaining in the time, I'll gavel once. With 30 seconds, I'll gavel twice. And when time is up, I'll keep gaveling until everyone stops talking. Now for the audience, we ask you the same respect that the panelists are giving to each other. Because it's not a debate, please refrain from any sort of clapping, snapping, or knee slapping during the forum. If you want to make your voice heard, there will be 30 minutes for audience questions after the moderated panel, and you can either submit your questions on the piece of paper that you got when you walked in, or you can tweet them at #UTDForum2017. And with that, let's begin our first topic. So our first topic this evening is going to be Black Lives Matter and police practices. Just as a little bit of an introduction, the Black Lives Matter movement arose as a protest movement in 2014 as a response to the fatal shooting of Michael Brown by a police officer. Since then, the Black Lives Matter movement has been the center of the debate about systematic racism in the justice system and how the police play a role in that. With our first position statement this evening, we go to Jerry.
Thank you. Once again, I'll go ahead and dive right in. Okay, so the first matter of hand is BLM and police practices. The movement of BLM at its core has a great concept, but has become flawed with time. One of the most famous portrayals of BLM was the presence in Baltimore where an uprising took place. Against whom exactly? Baltimore revolted against a minority police force, a black police chief, a black mayor, a black city council majority, 9 of 15, a black president, and a black attorney general. The subject of police brutality has become relevant in the past decade concerning African Americans. To say this is due to the color of skin is nonsensical. Of course, the brutality rates are going to be higher with a race of people who represent only 13% of America, but upwards 50% of murders. The police are permitted to use force when they deem necessary. This is to maintain law and order. Of course, this cannot be advocated without portraying the marginalized cases where it's taken too far. In these marginalized cases, the legal system has given penalties that have been deemed correct. Thank you.
All right, now we'll go to Robert.
Black Lives Matter is an ideological and political intervention in a world where Black lives are systematically and intentionally targeted for demise. It is an affirmation of Black folks' humanity, our contributions to this society, and our resilience in the face of deadly oppression. This group addresses issues such as the fact that African Americans make up 13% of the US population, but more than 20% of those shot and killed by police officers, and 34% of the total prison population. Just last year alone, there were 963 people killed and shot by police officers, and 258 of those killed were Black. I believe that there needs to be a dramatic reform towards policing. We need to go towards community policing. It is crucial that the justice system repairs the way in which it deals with the Black community. It is wrong for the justice system to favor whites over others because they have a complexion for the protection.
All right. And then before we begin with my questions, I just want to make sure that the other two panelists don't have anything specific that they want to say.
I just wanted to make clear that it's my understanding that the Baltimore protests stemmed from the death of Freddie Gray, who died while in police custody, and protesters were angry at the officer's lack of probable cause and the officer's negligence that resulted in the Black man's death.
Okay, so now let's start off with my first question. Essentially, it's this: is the criminal justice system inherently racist?
I can start with that. I believe that it is inherently racist. I've just listed to you different reasons to why it is. When 34% of the total population, of the total prison population, is African Americans, we only make up 13% of the U.S. population. That shows a disparity within the arrest rates. It shows disparity within our makeup of the prison population. And so that is one case where we see that the justice system is inherently biased. And also, African Americans are incarcerated at more than 5 times the rate of whites. That also shows another bias within the justice system. And so I would answer to that yes, the criminal justice system in America is inherently racist because of the way in which it treats Black folks at a disproportionate and disparaging rate than it does whites.
Okay, Jerry?
Okay, yeah, definitely he has a great point, and I'd like to point out that all of that is true. But the facts behind this is that these people are committing more crimes than any other statistical margin of race. And yes, I know this is not definitely fitting to the moral standards of things, but for certainty, when, like I said, only 13% of a race accounts for over 50% of the murders, that is just not acceptable. It's no longer due to the color of skin, but everything to do with culture. I mean, we have to start at the foundation here.
Okay, Robert?
I would like to say that Black culture is not rooted in violence. Black culture is not rooted in committing crimes. And so to try to say that the issue is culture is totally wrong because we are not born being criminals. We're not born starting to think about how to shoot each other. Black people are in the state that they're in because of the failed policies that have been placed on them. Black people are in the situation they're in because of policies such as the federal housing. Hold up, let me look at my thing. Because of the Federal Housing Act, which discriminated African Americans when giving out loans to Americans. And so failed policies and all these different policies that are placed on African Americans are the reasons to why we are in the situation that we are in America. And so you cannot blame culture. So I would just like to dispute that fact that culture is not the reason why African Americans are in the disparaging situation that we're in.
Okay, Jerry?
Okay, so what he named off a good amount of points there, and I definitely agree with a lot of that. But when it comes down to the fact, it's simple as, is this acceptable? Is this okay? And you can basically track that back to systematical oppression, many other such things as that, and that I've never been a denier of that. I do recognize that whites are definitely preferred in the justice system, although when you compare it to other topics, it can see the equality within it. I just want to say that it's really who we are as a culture. It's as we people, we have to excel, because personally I am African American, and although I am an advocate of a less than popular opinion, I just want to see the best for my race, and I believe that is doing what needs to be done. Thank you.
Okay, Maya?
To address culture, I want to point out that our American culture is rooted in our Constitution, and as far as I know, everyone has a constitutional right to be presumed innocent until proven guilty. And officers have no right to act without probable cause. Last I knew, race and culture weren't probable cause.
Okay, yeah, definitely. I do agree. I'm never going to say I disagree probably within this communication. But there is a hint that, so what you touched on was basically racial profiling. And racial profiling is good for our judicial system because systematically, if you do such things, it's more likely to find more, how would you say, guilty people, for instance. So just based on statistics alone, it is more logical to follow things such as looking at the skin color when looking at people who are more likely to commit crime.
Okay, Robert, really quick.
I just find that hard to believe that one would try to justify as to why people should be profiled. My skin color does not determine the crime that I'm going to commit. My skin color does not make me a criminal. So police officers should not use one's race as a way to determine whether they're going to commit a crime or not.
All right, so we're going to move on. The next topic that we're going to talk about is immigration. So in the 2016 election, now President Trump made immigration a major voting issue, mostly thanks to his proposal to build a border wall between the United States and Mexico. In 2017, that debate has sort of shifted to focus on immigrants already in the United States, especially after the president ended the DACA program. So we are going to get started with position statements this time first from Robert.
I first want to say that immigrants are welcome here. We should not grant immigration status based on merit alone. Rather, we should accept a diverse population of applicants that want to come to this country. Undocumented immigrants without a severe criminal background should not be deported, and those undocumented immigrants who do not have a severe criminal background should be given some pathway to legal permanent status or a work visa. We need a more comprehensive and sensible immigration system. We don't need a wall, which would cost taxpayers billions, because a wall will not solve the immigration system, and nor will it stop individuals from coming across the border.
Okay, and just by pure coincidence, we have our second one from Jerry.
The current state of immigration in the United States is in shambles. Having a president that cannot comprehend the direction to take with immigration policy is not helping. The fact is, illegal immigration is a problem. And Trump has taken steps to fix the problem, but illegal immigration should not be the main focus. It's a reformation of our current immigration policy, not quite a big wall. We need to promote a national identity that fosters legal immigration instead of illegal immigration. The biggest issue in regards is being able to effectively collect taxes, which stems from the issue of employers, which have no incentive to pay for legal labor. By fostering legal immigration, it will create a path towards a more efficient immigration system. Thank you.
Okay, and so once again, do any of our other panelists have anything they want to say or add? Okay, cool. All right, so now the first question that I have is, what more should be done to stop illegal immigration? Okay, Jerry.
Like I said within my little speech I had there, it's basically shrining the route to taking legal immigration and basically saying illegal immigration is not correct. For instance, Robert made a statement that all immigrants that are illegal immigrants that aren't having high crime rates should just be granted citizenship. It's basically fostering illegal immigration, which I do not agree with at all. Legal immigration, the pathway to take to that, should be shrined, and basically that's the correct route to take.
Okay, Grant.
As Jerry mentioned in his position statement, the immigration system in our country is broken. And so we have a really dual-based system where we award based on merit and we also award based on kind of a lottery system. And so there needs to be clear reform to that system that says that we welcome people strongly with merit-based, but we also need workers who don't have a lot of merit-based. We need those those lower-skilled workers to work in agricultural production and as cooks and in the manufacturing industry. And so there needs to be clear reform to help stop undocumented immigration. And we also need border security, whether that's in place of a wall that costs billions of dollars to build. I don't know, or if it relies more on border security and border patrol and fencing, then that's also an effective way to help curb illegal immigration in this country.
Robert?
First, I just want to clarify that I didn't say that they should be given a pathway to citizenship. I said legal permanent status or work visa. And I think a work visa is the way to go, especially the partnership that we could have with Mexico. We know that a lot of them they have a desire to come here and do some of those seasonal jobs. And so why don't we have a system where we give individuals like Mexicans work visas or individuals from other countries to come and do some of those seasonal work that most Americans won't do. So if there are individuals out there in the world who want to do some of these jobs, even very high skill jobs, if they qualify for it, we should be able to have some system that allows them to come here and work here easily. And I think that will be a great way of improving immigration system and lowering illegal immigrants.
Okay, Jerry?
I completely agree with the concept of work visas. The problem within that, though, in the current day and age is that many immigrants overstay their work visas. So that's basically, like I said, a reformation of the current system. I am nothing for deporting everybody, but it needs to be reformed, like I said.
Okay, so I guess sort of building off of that a little bit, if we don't think that undocumented immigrants should be deported en masse, what should happen to them when they're already in the United States?
These undocumented immigrants, according to Pew Global, 66% of them have lived here for over 20 years. That's 2 decades. Their lives are cemented here. They live as Americans. They haven't known another life in over 20 years, in some cases 30 years. And so those people who are here illegally, who have not committed major crimes, they should be allowed to stay. They have jobs here. They contribute to the economy. They contribute to society. They have culturally assimilated in most cases. So most those undocumented immigrants that are here, they should be allowed to stay. And they, as Robert said, they should be given not citizenship, but amnesty and be allowed to live in America the way they have lived for the past 2 decades.
Okay, so I guess sort of talking about, you both sort of brought up this idea about the border wall. So do you think that the border wall can be an effective form of border security? Yeah, Jerry.
I definitely think the border wall can be to a small minuscule extent. It's basically, I don't agree with it, honestly, and that's really rare from my position. I agree with the reformation of the system, like I said. It can serve as a purpose, but I just really don't see any point in it.
Okay, Robert.
Yeah, I mean, there's no need for a border wall. I mean, you got plains, you got a whole bunch of other waters, you know, the seas on both of the coastal lands. So it's just a stupid idea, and I think it's more of a talking point, more of a political talking point than something that's actually reliable and that could actually sustain immigration flow between the Mexican border and the United States border.
Okay, Grant.
A wall makes a statement and is a physical statement, but is it really going to manifest reality and stop illegal immigration? No. And it just costs so much money, and we need better infrastructure in this country more than we need a wall on the southern border of the United States.
Okay, so, since no one else has really anything to say, we can move on to women's health care. So, in recent years, the debate about women's healthcare has become fundamentally a debate about government-funded healthcare. Between employers refusing to provide birth control to the ever-present question of the funding of Planned Parenthood, women's healthcare now serves largely as a proxy for larger questions about government intervention. So, for this topic, we are going to have our first position statement from Grant.
Thank you, Ellie. As a developed society, women need access to contraceptives, family planning services, and other health services. The role of the government, however, should be limited. The government currently invests over $500 million into women's health services. That is money that could be spent on infrastructure, direct engagement in the community, or on the economy. While women's health is of vital importance to society and the economy, the government should have a minimal role in funding women's health.
All right, and then the second position statement is from Maya.
Today, women face more stresses than ever before. The percentage of families headed by single mothers is at its highest, and women today face fewer and fewer boundaries when it comes to advancing in the workplace. The last thing any woman needs to worry about is how to access reproductive health care. Now that the Trump administration seeks to end the Affordable Care Act, women stand to lose benefits that cover physician-prescribed birth control and emergency contraceptives. There's demand to, quote, defund Planned Parenthood, but doing so cuts off access to invaluable reproductive health services for both men and women, and especially hurts low-income individuals and immigrants who can't afford it anywhere else and who don't have access. It's the federal government's responsibility to ensure comprehensive and affordable health care to all Americans, and last I knew, reproductive health still falls under that umbrella.
Okay. And then before I ask any questions, do either of the other panelists have anything they want to say? Robert.
I just want to say that women they're equal citizens as well, that they pay taxes as well, and so they should get as much benefit and as much help from the government that they possibly can. And so I don't think that we should reallocate the funding that the government is sending to women's health. I think we should give them as much funding as possible that we're able to base off of the budget that we have. And so I don't believe that we should reallocate the funding that we have going towards women's health.
Okay. Jerry.
I'd also make the notion that that I believe women are equal too. Like, that's a simple statement. I don't think that's really a point that any of us disagree on within this contention. I think they deserve all equality within whatever rights they desire. And I do have a point you'll see about healthcare rights in such instances within the next topic. So.
Cool. Okay. So let's start off with this question. Should employers be allowed to refuse birth control based on religion? Robert.
Nope. I say that when it comes to the workplace, religion should be left out, unless if we're operating in a church or a place like that where religion is the main focus. And I can understand you trying to make a case for religion, but if we're in a workplace, your religious values should not trump my basic human rights, and so I would say no to that.
Okay. Cool. All right. So my next question is sort of shifting gears a little bit. How exactly should sex education be approached in schools? Jerry.
I'm actually interestingly on a board that is actually revolving around this topic right now, UVoice Youth Philanthropy Board of Iowa. We're really debating on topics right now, but sex ed has been one that's come up relevant, and I believe it should definitely be. I feel like there's a stigma that really goes around sex education, and it should definitely be portrayed 100% within the school district. Like, it has to be informed. This is probably one of the next biggest issues that teenagers face, or even basic adults face. So 100%. Is that an answer? Thank you.
All right, Maya.
I have to agree wholeheartedly with Jerry that we need to provide some sort of program to educate students not only on sexual education, but also sexual violence and abusive sexual relationships, especially as many of us head into college.
Cool. Okay. So then the next question that I have is sort of about something that Maya brought up in her position statement as should the government fund Planned Parenthood? Maya.
I think, yes, the government should fund Planned Parenthood. And Planned Parenthood right now is jointly funded by both the federal and the state level. And we've already seen Texas pull out their funding from Planned Parenthood. And a study published in the New England Journal of Medicine concluded that after excluding Planned Parenthood from state Medicaid funding, in those counties where there were Planned Parenthood centers, there was a 36% decrease in the number of claims for long-term contraceptives. And there was no similar decrease in other counties that didn't have Planned Parenthood centers. So through correlation, a conclusion can be drawn that these people who were receiving Planned Parenthood funding or receiving contraceptives through Planned Parenthood are no longer receiving those contraceptives from other sources.
Jerry.
When it comes to the execution of human beings, Planned Parenthood should not be funded.
Oh, Robert.
You guys can hear me right? All right. I think the Planned Parenthood should continue to be funded. I think that the majority of the work they do really helps women, especially when it comes to low-income women. And I think that if that resource and those resources are uprooted from those low-income women that need them the most, that we will be hurting them. I think that we should give them the funding that they need. You know what? If you don't believe that your money should go to them because of abortion and whatnot, make it a law where taxpayer money doesn't go to abortion if that's your issue. But the other work that they do, it's helping low-income women, and so we should be giving them funding for that.
Grant.
While I don't believe that the federal government should be embezzling money into women's health services in large quantities. I think that Planned Parenthood does serve a need in helping low-income women, and that is of vital importance to our economy, to our society, that we have to help the health of all people. And so if the government is not going to fund Planned Parenthood, then there needs to be tax incentives and there needs to be tax breaks. And there needs to be ways that the government is going to help these women, if not through monetary contribution. But women's health is vitally important, and we have to find a way to help support that.
Okay, so our next topic sort of builds off of that last topic, delving a little bit deeper into it. It's about healthcare. So healthcare has been a hot button issue in 2017, largely due to the Republican majority's attempts to repeal and replace the Affordable Care Act. Because of their lack of success on that front, we're left with pretty much the same healthcare system we had a year ago, which prompts an important debate about what healthcare should look like in this country. So our first position statement this time is from Maya.
In the wealthiest nation on the planet, access to quality healthcare should be a right that belongs to every citizen. The Affordable Care Act marked a monumental step in achieving that goal by extending coverage to millions of uninsured Americans and preventing insurance companies from denying those with pre-existing conditions. Republicans in Congress have tried and failed to repeal the ACA, and yet really have to sit down to work on any compromise with the opposition. Meanwhile, this inaction puts the whole ACA in danger of collapse. We're too good of a country to revert back to denying coverage for pre-existing conditions, and to not be able to guarantee paid parental leave from work, and to not be able to offer basic health coverage for everyone. It's time to put aside our partisanship, because we can't fix this all at once, but we have to start somewhere. Like, we can't deny that our country's health system is broken. Simultaneously, we also have to rein in our costs. We have the highest per capita spending of any developed country in the world, but we're still ranked 28th in terms of quality outcome.
All right, and then our second position statement is from Jerry.
So the current state of healthcare is in shambles following the Affordable Care Act. The ACA was stripping away our basic freedoms as Americans. I believe I have a different view of rights. I don't believe in positive rights. I believe you have inalienable rights from government and other human beings, and what I mean by that is to be free from other human beings. I have a right to be not murdered by you, but not take your money in order to feed myself. The job of the state is to protect you from other people. I don't believe the state's job is to make you flourish. It's your job to make you flourish. There are three things you can have on healthcare: universality, affordability, or quality. You can have only two of those three. There's no system that provides all three. If you want universality and affordability, it's going to be crappy quality. That's nationalized healthcare. If you want universality and equality, then you have to bankrupt the country, spending inordinate amounts of money. If you want what I want, which is affordability and quality, then that means you have to open up competition. But it means people are going to have to rely on the community of people around them, but not the government. Create more supplies, create more profit, which creates more incentive, is the only way to make healthcare great.
All right, so do the other two panelists have anything that they want to say on this before we begin? Yeah, Robert.
The only thing I would like to say is that we've tried the private market to do the work for us when it comes to healthcare, and it hasn't done the work. We've actually tried to go in a way where the federal government is involved in the process of giving healthcare to as much Americans as possible, and that has helped more Americans than before in the private market. And so I believe that healthcare shouldn't be a thing where we're making money off of. People's health is something that we should all be concerned with. And if I pay my taxpayer money and I can't afford to go to the doctor, I believe that in some way or another, the government should be helping me to pay for my needs.
Okay, Grant.
Going off what Robert said, we tried the private sector market, and that left millions of people uninsured. We've tried one party writing the entire healthcare program for a select million group of people, and guess what? That hasn't worked. And then we had the Republican Party try and write healthcare again, and again, it didn't work. So I think that we have to find that balance, and we have to. The government has to stabilize the healthcare market privately, but we also have to provide insurance for those who are terminally ill, and we have to provide health insurance for the poor who cannot, for whatever reasons, afford super expensive healthcare in this country. Because as Robert said, you should be able to live. You should be able to live a healthy lifestyle, and especially in the richest country in the world.
Okay, Jerry.
And I feel as though the assertion has been made that I am assuming that these people do not have a right to life or liberty or whatever you want to go on those topics. The simple problem with this for me is that you're basically telling me with the ACA that people have to do. They have to buy this, no matter what. And it's basically that's unconstitutional. Unconstitutional. That is just simply unconstitutional. I do not believe in those ideals. I am personally a libertarian that considers himself bound to the constitutional. Although I do say I'm a Republican, some of my views have a libertarian type view on it with Constitution. Thank you.
Okay, so my first question sort of about this is specifically about the Affordable Care Act. So what aspects of the Affordable Care Act work and which ones don't? Yeah, Grant.
The Affordable Care Act cost $110 billion in 2016, according to Time magazine, and nearly 11 million people rely on the Affordable Care Act for access to health insurance. So it works really well that it provides terminally ill people with coverage, and that it helps to stabilize the health insurance market to some extent on some state and local levels. But the biggest problem with the Affordable Care Act is that it has cost $110 billion, and that it has left a lot of other health insurance markets in shambles, and a lot of health insurance companies are pulling out of the ACA.
Okay. So another question specifically about, this is something that Jerry brought up, about the individual mandate specifically. Should everyone be required to buy health insurance like they are for car insurance or not? Yeah, Jerry.
As I said before, this is unconstitutional, and that's really where I lie it.
Robert.
Well, so is it unconstitutional to require that everyone gets a car insurance? I mean, I think we're just talking about reality, and we're talking about that we don't know what's going to happen tomorrow. You could get in a car accident, something could happen to you, you can get terminally ill. So I think it's the best thing to say that you should be insured, or you should have some type of coverage at all times, because you don't know when you're going to get terminally ill, or you're going to get some kind of illness. So I think it's just the practical and the common sense thing to do, to have everybody insured, because we don't know what's going to happen in the next hour and the next day. And so to me, it's just common sense.
Okay, Jerry.
You said two key words, practical and common sense, and those are what a lot of Americans lack these days, I believe. So the simple fact is in the motion is that if you're forcing these people to do this, it is simply not correct. It's unconstitutional. How are you going to tell somebody that they have to buy health care? It's just, once again, constitutional. Thank you.
Yeah, Grant.
If it's unconstitutional to require people to buy health care, then is it unconstitutional to require everybody or every male to register for the draft?
Jerry.
I'd like to point to that motion. You're basically bringing up a fallacy. I mean, the topic here at discussion is we are talking about healthcare. We're not talking about the selected services. Thank you.
Okay, Robert, really fast.
I would like to say that when the government is requiring for everyone to be insured, the government is trying to think of the best thing for you. We want you to be able to have health care to be insured when you get sick. That's a good thing. That's not a bad thing.
Okay, so next thing we're going to talk about is labor issues. So union rights are a major voting issue in every election, but they've taken on a new prominence, especially in Iowa politics. After the Iowa legislature scaled back collective bargaining rights for states' employees, labor issues played a significant role for voters in both school board and city council elections in 2017. So our first position statement here comes from Grant.
Thank you, Ellie. The minimum wage has failed to keep up with inflation and no longer suffices a living wage. While some argue that the minimum wage is not meant to be a living wage, the reality of our economy is that for some, it has become that. The minimum wage needs to be raised over several years with state and local influence to $10 an hour. This will increase economic activity, reduce poverty, and reduce government welfare spending. In regards to collective bargaining and unionization, workers should be able to unionize because unions empower workers and provide job security. Union power must be kept in check, though, by workers, employers, and the local and state governments.
All right, and then our second position statement is from Robert.
From 2000 to 2010, income levels for those in the middle class has decreased by 7%. Conversely, the top tier of Americans, those earning over $186,000, saw their incomes rise. This wealth gap is really due to the wage gap within our country. We need to work towards decreasing the wage gap by increasing the minimum wage. A single mother should not have to work 2 or more jobs in order to provide for their family, which is why we have to push for a livable wage. Unions should have the right to organize. The government should protect unions to the same extent that it protects the interests of big money corporations.
All right, and so do either of our other panelists have anything that they want to say based on that? Cool. Okay, so the first question that I have has to do with unions. So where can unions help labor rights and where can they hurt? Yeah, Maya.
when unions spend the large amount, when union leaders spend the large amount of money that they've collected from their union workers through dues, and they use that to try and sway political candidates to vote one way or another through different lobbying techniques, I think that's a misuse of funds, and they should be less focused on trying to better themselves and thinking more long term on behalf of their workers.
Robert?
I think one way in which unions are good for labor rights is that research has shown that when employees are within a union, there's this ability to communicate with their boss, to resolve problems in the workplace, to further improve the quality of the employees' operations. And so, in that sense, unions are good for labor rights, and that they're able to give the employee the communication that they need to their boss. And so, in that way, it is good for labor rights.
Okay, cool. So one thing that both of you brought up in your position statements is the minimum wage. So should the minimum wage be increased? If so, how much? Grant.
According to the Congressional Budget Office, if the minimum wage was raised to even $9 an hour over 3-step intervals, there would be a loss of 200,000 jobs, most of which would be minimum wage jobs. However, according to that same statistic, over 278 million jobs would also see wage increases. So while the minimum wage would cause a loss in jobs, we are continuing to add jobs to our economy, and we would also see a rise in wages for 278 million people.
Jerry.
So the whole idea behind raising the wages is that supposedly it'll make the economy boom and like this trickle up economics, so to speak. And raising the minimum wage is probably the worst solution that any of us could ever think of right now. For the simple being is that sorry. So where was I? Okay. If they were to be raised, what we're going to see is basically what happened in Seattle. What happened in Seattle was they raised it up to the $15 minimum wage or whatever. I forget what. Many countless jobs are lost. I mean, the KFC. Okay, this is actually really funny. The chicken bucket went up to like $9.50. It was just basic inflation that really caused a dismissal within the community, causing people to leave. It was just not a good solution, and I am a firm advocate of that today.
Grant?
If the minimum wage was raised, according to the Economic Policy Institute, GDP would increase by $22 billion, and that's equivalent to around 80,000 jobs. So raising the minimum wage helps the economy and creates jobs ultimately in the end. While there would be loss of jobs right away, you'll further see jobs being created because of the rapid increase in GDP.
Robert?
I think another benefit of raising the minimum wage is that it will give more Americans more money to be able to spend in the economy. In that way, the economy will boost and that I have more money to spend in the economy. And so minimum wage, it is a positive thing. And, when you're talking about people that have to work multiple jobs because of the minimum wage that we have right now, they should not have to do that. They should have a livable wage where they're able to work one job and still be able to provide for their families. I think $10 is a great compromise for both parties. Obviously, I would love it for $15, but I think $10 is a great spot to start at.
Jerry?
I feel as though the main point around minimum wage raising is basically when is economic inequality going to solve? And that might be taking a jump, but I'm going to go ahead and take the jump. Okay, so the point behind economic inequality is why, the question comes to my mind, why not just pay everybody the same amount, regardless of the job that they do? And then we can just have a government nationalize all business in order to accomplish this. Why not just do that in order to accomplish this? Why not just do that? Would be economic equality at its finest, would it not? Otherwise, you're basically sanctioning economic inequality on some level or another.
Grant?
Okay, both of you brought up a living wage, and so I'm going to talk about wages in America. So according to the Bureau of Labor Statistics, the average private sector job pays $20.50 an hour. There are people who have to live off $7.25 an hour, and that is unfair in this country, and that is what has contributed to such rapid culture and economic inequality in America.
Okie dokie. So we'll move on to our next topic, which is going to be tax reforms. So, because they affect every person in the United States, taxes are one of the most important issues that people vote on. Republicans in Congress recently introduced a new tax plan that changes the way taxes work, most notably by changing the number of tax brackets from 4 to 7. So, our first position statement here comes from Robert.
While the Republican tax plan reduces the tax brackets as a way, in theory, to lower taxes for the middle class, they have kept the tax rate for the rich at the same percentage, which means that we will lose tax revenue. Their plan also cuts the corporate tax rate from a top of 35% to a flat rate of 20% starting in 2018, which makes no sense to me as to why we should be reducing the corporate tax rate when these corporations don't already pay their fair share in taxes in the first place. The rich should have to pay more in taxes since they have more to offer. We will not be able to fund the programs that we need to fund without everyone pitching in their fair share. We also need to leverage taxes for the middle and low income class to where they're not suffering from paying taxes.
And our other position statement comes from Grant.
All right. The current tax code is overcomplicated, penalizes productivity and investments, and has kept economic growth stagnated at the post-World War II level of 3%. Tax reform should center on eliminating loopholes, providing corporations, the middle class, and small businesses with tax relief. Small businesses should not have to pay taxes because they are providing economic productivity and jobs directly on the local level and investments on the local economy. While the corporate tax rate should be decreased, allowing for billions of dollars in GDP increases, the middle and lower class need tax relief, while the upper class has more money and should pay more in taxes.
All right, do either of the other panelists have anything they want to add? Cool. So the first question that I have is essentially, are tax cuts the only way to access tax reform? Yeah, Robert.
I think in some way there is an argument to be made for tax cuts, especially if you're in the middle class. That you want to be able to have some money left in your pocket to spend. I understand that, but I don't think that we should be cutting taxes for people that have more money than they know what to do with. If I'm earning $1 million a year or whatnot, I mean, do I really need a tax cut? I'm still going to be fine. And so I think that when tax cuts are introduced, they should be going to help the middle class and those who need it the most. But for the rich and for corporations, they don't need it. I mean, again, they don't already pay their fair share in taxes in the first place. But they don't need another tax break.
Okay, Grant.
I want to disagree with the part about corporate taxes. While lots of Republicans like to advocate that the corporate tax rate should be 15% or 0%, as Donald Trump advocated during the campaign, corporate taxes are important to the economy. But the U.S. currently has a corporate tax rate of 35%. And as Robert pointed out, lots of corporations hire fancy tax lawyers who get them out of paying corporate taxes. So we need to simplify our tax code so that those loopholes don't exist in the first place. But China, the second largest economy and the fastest growing economy in the world, and which also has lots of foreign, including U.S. investment, has a corporate tax rate of only 25%. And Canada, which has the 10th largest economy in the world, has a corporate tax rate of 26%. So I think for the U.S. to be competitive on the global scale, we really have to simplify our tax code and cut corporate taxes. Not to 0% or anything, but we do need to have our corporate taxes balanced and fair with the rest of the powerful economies.
Okay, Grant, so something that you talked about both in your statement and in that answer is that we should simplify the tax code. Like, what exactly do you mean by that?
So one key aspect of the GOP current tax reform bill is that it simplifies the brackets from 7 to 4. So it really creates one lower class bracket, one middle class bracket, or two middle class brackets, and then one upper class bracket. So if you want to see a graphic, I printed one out from the New York Times. And also part of that is you have to eliminate deductions, and you have to eliminate, or not deductions, but you have to eliminate loopholes that allow corporations and the super wealthy to really have their taxes basically written off for them. So some key components of this current tax plan are that you take away what are two tax brackets for the lower class of 10 and 15%, and you make it 12%. So when you simplify percentages and you simplify the code from 70,000 pages down to, say, 7,000 pages, you eliminate a lot of loopholes that corporations and the super wealthy get away with not paying their taxes through.
Robert.
I think it's a good. I think we would all like to read federal documents that are just 5 pages or shorter and whatnot. But at what cost do we want a simpler tax system? Is the cost going to be that some people's tax rates are going to be increased, or some people's tax rates are going to be decreased, as we do see in this Republican plan? As Mitch McConnell said the other day, he said that. I misspoke earlier when I said that nobody in the middle class is going to get a tax increase. And so what I'm trying to say is that at what cost are we going to simplify? If we say we want to simplify the tax code, at what cost? If it means that we're going to simplify it just for the purpose of simplifying, and then okay. But if we're simplifying it as a way to increase the taxes on middle income and those in lower class, and giving tax breaks to the rich, then I say no. So I think we should weigh the pros and cons to simplifying the tax code.
Grant.
All right. So the current GOP tax plan says that if you make between $0 a year, yay, go you, to $90,000 a year, and that's married joint filing, you pay 12% in taxes. So that's up to $10,800 in taxes, and they're also increasing the child tax deductions and some other tax deductions. So you'd be paying less than $10,800 per year. And for the middle class, if you're making between $90,000 and $260,000, you're paying 25% in taxes. So really, the middle class isn't getting much of a tax increase. The lower class is actually getting a tax decrease, and the middle class is also getting a tax decrease. So it really changes the tax bracket system, and it doesn't hurt the middle class as much as a lot of people are thinking that it will.
Okay, Robert.
I believe that the lower class, before in the current system, lower class have to pay 10% over the tax rate for the tax. It's 10% for the tax rate for the lower class.
Yeah,
Yes,
Grant.
if you make up to $19,000.
All right. Well, now if you're in the lower class, you have to pay 12%. That's an increase in the amount of money that you have to make, and so they're not decreasing the amount that people in the lower class have to pay. And so I say in that sense that they are hurting the lower class.
Okay, Grant, if you want to say something, you can really quick, but otherwise we'll move on. Okay, cool. Okay, so we are going to shift gears overseas. So this is sort of our foreign policy section of the forum. So the first topic that we're going to talk about is Russia. So despite the Cold War ending decades ago, Russia has reemerged as one of the starkest enemies of the United States after the 2016 election. Allegations of election interfering have made many people reconsider our relationship with the former Soviet Union and ask if there's any way to get along. So our first position statement here comes from Grant.
You get to talk a lot in this part. All right. Russia is a threat to our political, economic power in Eastern Europe and Central Asia, and a threat especially to our allies in the region. Russia interfered in our election, and we must support the Department of Justice's investigation. The United States must take a strong position against the Kremlin and Putin's power, supporting our allies in NATO and in Asia, which protect our trade and regional military strength in the region.
Okay, and our other position statement, once again, comes from Robert.
Russia interfered within our elections. This is not to say that they altered votes, rather to say that they played a role as a foreign entity trying to sway public opinion about presidential candidates. And we should not tolerate such behavior from Russia. We should support the DOJ and Special Counsel Robert Mueller within their investigation. The president or any other public servant or institutions should not interfere with the investigation. We should push for a full, transparent and independent investigation into Russia's full involvement within the 2016 presidential election. We should also support our NATO allies and all other allies around the world whom Russia may pose as a threat to their economic and political stability.
All right, do either of our other panelists want to chip in? Okay, cool. All right, so the first question that I have is this idea of, if true, what do allegations of election interfering mean for our relationship with Russia? Oh boy. Robert, go first.
I think it means that we don't have a good relationship with Russia, obviously, and that they are definitely a threat to American democracy and American political stability. And we should all take that seriously, and we should do whatever we have to in order to stop them, in order to punish them for the behaviors that they have committed within the 2016 presidential election.
Okay, Grant.
Russia's economy is already in trouble, and so I think that further sanctioning Russia is what ultimately has to be done if they did interfere in our election. And that is a supreme it's a supreme allegation against them, of course. But when you look at the 17 agencies who have supported that conclusion, then I think that you really have to look at Russia is not our friend. Russia cannot be our friend. And we have to really work with our allies. We have to work with Russia's allies. And we have to say, we will be a better ally to you than Russia, because Russia's only relationships are with countries who they strong arm and they force to be their allies.
Okay, and our relationship with Russia just doesn't have to do with the 2016 election either. After they invaded Crimea a few years ago, the sort of question about what role the United States should play in curbing Russian aggression came up. So that's my question. What role should the United States play in curbing Russian aggression? Grant this time.
Russia invading the Ukraine is a threat to both regional security and also to one of our key NATO allies. And so we have to support NATO. We have to support the people that we have said, we will be your friend. We have to stand up to Russia, and we have to support our friends in the region. And so if President Putin wants to invade the Ukraine, then it has to be done legally. It has to be done with the consent of those people. And both sides have to work out a deal. But in this case, Russia has not done that. And so we have to send a clear message to Moscow that this will not stand again. We have to stand up to Russia, and we have to be a strong promoter of our allies.
Okay. Does anyone else have any thoughts on that? No? Okay. So when we're talking about election meddling in general, should the United States put any safeguards in to ensure that election meddling from foreign adversaries is impossible? And if so, what should those be? Yeah, so should the United States put in any sort of safeguards to ensure that election meddling from foreign adversaries is impossible? And if so, what sorts of things should we do?
I think we saw that within the presidential election that there were Russians who were paying for Facebook ads. I think it was up to 3,000 Russian ads on Facebook. And so I think one of the things that we could do is that we need to have the intelligence community working with all these different social media platforms such as Facebook, Twitter, and Instagram, all the different social media platforms that we have as a way to ensure that countries such as Russia or China are not buying ads to influence public opinion on Americans and how they view politicians or presidential candidates. And so I think working with social media and those individuals who are ahead of those social media platforms is one of the greatest ways in which we could interfere with whatever other entities trying to do within our politics.
Okay, Jerry?
I definitely agree with what Robert said. I believe that the election should be truthful as possible. When it comes to who we are as a nation, we must be sure to protect who we are as a nation, so to speak. We have in our Constitution, for example, freedom of speech, freedom of to bear arms, and all these many other things must be protected. And this is just one example that, for instance, the election is one of those. Keep it truthful, and that's my opinion on that.
Okay, so now we're going to kind of switch gears back to this idea about curbing Russian aggression. So when we're talking about that, how exactly is the best way to do that? Grant talked a little bit about sanctions. Do you think that's the best way to accomplish those sorts of goals, or is it military aggression or diplomacy? What sort of way? Yeah, Robert.
I think we should avoid military aggression at all costs, especially when we're talking about Russia, especially with all the nuclear weapons that they have. And, a lot of them, we don't even know where they're at. And so I think military should be the last resort for anything that we do. I think we should try sanctions. I think that's a pretty good way to hit them, especially with our economy. Russia's not really producing anything. They need the U.S. We don't need them as much, but they really need us, especially when it comes to their economy. And so sanctions is a great way, and working with social media platforms, I say is a great way to fight them.
Okay, cool. So our next topic is about the refugee crisis. So the European refugee crisis, beginning in 2015, raised a lot of questions for Americans about the role of government in accepting refugees. Additionally, because most of the refugees came from Muslim-majority countries, the same debate has shifted into one about terrorism and prejudice. So our first position statement here is going to come from Maya.
For some, Syrian refugee equals terrorist. However, of the 784,000 refugees we've taken in since 9/11, none of them have been linked to plotting, conspiring, or executing a terrorist attack. Our real threat today comes from self-radicalized individuals within the United States who have unrestricted access to radical propaganda through the internet and social media. San Bernardino, Orlando, Las Vegas, three of the deadliest mass shootings in U.S. history, all committed by U.S. citizens and legal residents. When you examine who commits these acts of terror in our country, where's the justification for turning away thousands of innocent people running from oppressive and violent regimes? We have a strong history of welcoming the oppressed. We're a nation of immigrants. We're enriched by our immigrants, and many people in this room are descendants of immigrants or are immigrants like me. The refugee crisis isn't political. Isn't just political. It's also humanitarian. In conclusion, banning refugees is not the solution to terrorism. We're doing more harm than good by weakening our standing as a haven for those fleeing oppression.
Okay, and then our other position statement is from Jerry.
The concern of the refugee crisis is prevalent, but needs to be better moderated. I ask, do they have experience with Western-style democracy? Do they believe in the same rights as we do? I think it's correct to look at the values of the people we would bring in. For example, to bring in people from Syria, which has no history of democracy, no history of human rights, no history of basic American rights like freedom of speech, no idea of what equality of sexes is like, there's going to be a culture clash. Just look at Europe, for example. Thank you.
Okay, either of the other panelists have anything they want to say? Robert.
I believe that when we start talking about, who's more democratic and who's not more democratic, I don't think we can say that the U.S. that we're more democratic or that we have a better human rights record. We surely do not have a better human rights record with the way in which we treat people of color and black people, especially in this country. So to try to say that, these people are coming from a country that doesn't have a good human rights record, and so that's why we should accept them, that's just crazy to me to think about. If people are hurting, we should do whatever we can to help them in times of needs. And we also have to remember that the U.S. has a great role in the crisis in the Middle East, that we played a great impact in why the Middle East is the way it is. And so to some extent, we do have some kind of responsibility to help those people who are suffering from this terror and from the kind of things that we have impacted and had a role in.
Grant?
While Robert touched on the humanitarian and human rights aspect of that, I want to touch on the democracy aspect. Those refugees want to come to America because it's a democracy. They are fleeing an authoritarian, totalitarian regime where they are oppressed, and that is why they want democracy. Just because they haven't had experience with democracy, that's what they crave in America.
Okay, Jerry?
But to not consider what these people are coming from is totally nonsensical. For instance, if the problem that has been stated is self-radicalization, is that definitely from the root of where they came from? That's what I have to say to that.
Maya?
I'd like to clarify that the self-radicalization I referred to was of citizens and legal residents who currently live in the United States, not people coming through the immigration system.
Jerry?
But in the same instance, it can also correlate to people that have, such as refugees, that have been self-radicalized here. Actually, you can't really say self-radicalized, quote unquote, but they have been radicalized through the interests of where they have came from.
Robert?
I think that refugees are not as much of a threat to us as the likes of Dylan Roof are. The amount of mass shootings that we've seen in America, it wasn't a refugee committing those mass shootings. It was American-born citizens. So for us to try to look at refugees as this bigger threat, it's ridiculous to me, because the biggest threat that we've been experiencing right now is mass shootings. 50 people killed in Las Vegas, just in Texas, 20-something people killed. Those were not refugees who committed those mass shootings. It was American-born citizens. So those people in America are more of a threat to us than refugees who are in Syria. So I think this whole notion that refugees are a threat to us is ridiculous, and it's just fear-mongering.
Jerry?
The assertion that refugees are always a threat to us is not the case, but I'm talking about the cases and where they are. I am a person who goes off the foundations of that Americans come first, and that's what I seek in my best interest.
Grant?
This is mostly a humanitarian issue, and this is mostly a human life issue. So according to Filippo Grandi, who is the UN High Commissioner for Refugees, he said that Syria is the biggest humanitarian and refugee crisis of our time, a continuing cause of suffering for millions. So I don't think it's worth it to say that these people are going to come here and commit terrorism when what they are fleeing is terrorism. They are coming here to live. They are coming here for a better life. Over 5 million people have fled Syria as refugees, and over 6 million are currently displaced within Syria alone, not as refugees. So this is more of a humanitarian issue and seeing that these people are fleeing from terrorism. That's what they're going away from, and they're coming to America for safety and for human rights and for democracy.
Jerry.
I mean, yeah, indeed, America is great, and I understand that, and many people want to come here, but not everybody can come here. It's a simple fact. Many of these other countries have not even opened up. So, for example, actually, the UMA which is the Muslim nations. They're typically supposed to take all these refugees in, and what they have done, as we've seen, they have not taken in nearly the amount of immigrants that refugees that they should be taking in. And I feel as though that's a problem that should be addressed, that we are not the only solution to everybody's problems. Our interest comes first.
I look back at our history and I think about, when Jews were fleeing the Holocaust, did we say that, European countries, it's European countries' responsibility to take them in? Or at some point do we realize that it is our responsibility as human beings to take in other human beings who are suffering? So we shouldn't say that just because why aren't these other countries doing it? We should look at what can we as America do to help these people. That's what we should be looking at. Obviously, we can work with partners in the Middle East to see what they can do, and there are countries in the Middle East doing some of those work, like Turkey. People are going in there as a way to be able to go to other countries, and so we shouldn't look at what other countries are doing. We should look at what we can do for those people.
Okay, Grant.
In regards to what Jerry said about other countries not taking in their fair share of refugees, Turkey has currently taken in over 3.2 million Syrians, around 260,000 which live in 21 government refugee camps. So Turkey has taken in its fair share of refugees, as have a lot of other countries.
That's all the time we have for that one. So, sorry. So we're going to move on to the next subtopic that we have, which is North Korea. So, after decades of tense rhetoric and empty threats, North Korea's nuclear weapons program has finally started to garner the attention of the international community, with Kim Jong-un ramping up tests in recent months. North Korea is somewhat of a mystery to the rest of the world, remaining largely isolated and separate from the rest of the world. So, our first position statement here comes from Grant.
The only solution to North Korea is to continue to stand up to the current totalitarian regime, work with China and our allies in Europe and Asia to continue to impose economic sanctions on the regime. The ultimate goal in Korea is a one-state, democratic, economically powerful Korea.
Okay, and the other position statement comes from Maya.
President Obama told Donald Trump before he took office that North Korea is the most dangerous and difficult security challenge he will face. Given the current state of affairs, doing nothing is simply not an option anymore, not when they have a warhead capable of reaching our shores. Shooting nuclear warheads at each other isn't going to solve anything, though. First of all, our president needs to tone down his divisive rhetoric. Calling Kim Jong-un short and fat or little rocket man isn't going to solve anything either. And threatening to, quote, fire and fury like the world has never seen is also a dangerous game. Instead, he should be using his presidential energies to work with allies such as China to apply economic pressure to North Korea. And China is key, as Grant said, as they have yet to impose strict economic sanctions, and they're engaging in backdoor deals to maintain economic and political stability on the Korean peninsula. In other words, Kim Jong-un depends on China, and therefore China has leverage. As we speak, the North Koreans are developing a warhead capable of striking the East Coast. So strategizing with our allies and getting China to engage in talks with the opposition are both crucial to dialing down the nuclear tension.
Okay. Does either of the other panelists want to say anything about that? Yeah, Robert.
I think really one of the biggest issues that we have with North Korea is Donald Trump. I think the rhetoric that he keeps on spewing, this divisiveness as if, him and Kim Jong-un are two second graders playing in a playground and they just keep going at it with each other. I think that's more dangerous, to the situation that we have. And so I think while there has to be a level of aggression and a level of threat when you're dealing with someone like a country like North Korea, we also must be measured with our diplomatic approaches to North Korea. And when we say things like, we're just going to blow it off the face of the earth or something like that, that is a dangerous rhetoric to use. And so we have to be careful with the words that we use when combating North Korea. We have to be aggressive, but be careful with the rhetoric at the same time.
Jerry.
Why does it have to be so hard to respect the president? It shouldn't have to be this hard, guys. Some of the things Trump says is definitely nonsensical. It really angers me, especially like blow them off the earth or little man. Like, that's totally nonsensical. The real problem here is that North Korea is denying any unalienable rights there's ever been told. They are definitely a problem. And to do this, as my fellow friends have said, is that economic sanctions, economic pressure is going to be our route, and also progressing in friendships with other countries.
Oh my God. Okay. So I guess this is sort of something that Robert touched on a little bit, but should diplomacy or military aggression be prioritized? Sure, Robert.
I think we have to always start with diplomacy. I think, when you're dealing with nuclear weapons, that you always have to be careful about military aggression. So I think, obviously, since Bill Clinton, we've tried diplomatic approaches, and you know what? It hasn't gotten us too far in terms of helping us with North Korea, but it also hasn't gotten us nuked. So at the same time, I think that diplomatic approaches have helped us not get nuked. So maybe there is some testament to it. So military aggression, I say we still need to lay low on that and just go towards the sanction route.
Maya.
I do want to mention that while diplomatic, I totally agree with Robert that we should lay off the military and as a last resort, like we're doing with Russia. But if Donald Trump's interactions with government officials in his Asia tour recently is any indication of how he handles social interactions with other political leaders, we may not want to put our president in that situation where he'll be face to face with the little rocket man, and where both of them have the power to launch nuclear warheads at each other.
Jerry.
I'd really appreciate that we just stop throwing jabs at our president. Like, it's really nonsensical right now. Yeah, he deserves them completely, but it's really going off the real problem here, and that's North Korea. When it comes to the selection of the military process, I believe that it has to be kept in mind no matter what. Diplomatic progressions are always nice, but we cannot be scared to use our arsenals that we contain.
Grant.
I think that whatever diplomatic solution the U.S. tries to seek, North Korea is going to continue to ignore, just as they have done since Bill Clinton tried to establish diplomatic solutions with North Korea. The real solution here is to work with China and to have diplomatic solutions with China and President Xi Jinping to get Kim Jong-un out of power, because you cannot have a successful Korea when the Un regime is continued to be in power. And so we have to work with China more than we have to work with our own State Department.
Okay, so I guess we only have like a minute left of this one, but do you guys think that there's a peaceful solution to the North Korea crisis? Jerry.
No.
Maya.
Well, what Grant was just talking about seemed pretty peaceful, working with China to stop their backdoor dealings with North Korea. And also, since their president has been quoted saying that Kim Jong-un is the most, I don't remember what the exact quote was, but he really doesn't like the president of North Korea. And so working with China is our best option to maintain civility.
Grant, really quick.
As terrible as it might seem, I think that ultimately there will be blood spilled on the Korean Peninsula to unify Korea.
Okay, well, with that, we're going to move on this is sort of like our miscellaneous category. So the first thing that we're going to talk about here is going to be gun control. So in the last 511 days, there have been 555 mass shootings in the United States. An increasing sense of fear about gun violence in America, paired with an increased frequency of high-profile shootings, has long sparked a debate about gun control, especially how it can function under the Second Amendment. So our first position statement here comes from Maya.
The United States gun homicide rate is 25 times higher than that of any other high-income country. And still, whenever there's a mass shooting in the U.S., any initial talk of gun laws quickly fades. 2 of the 5 deadliest mass shootings in the U.S. have occurred in the past 2 months alone, Las Vegas, and Sutherland Springs, Texas. It's time to pass a meaningful ban on military-style assault weapons, specifically targeting automatics and at least some automatics, as well as the bump stocks used to convert semi-automatic weapons to near-automatic firing speed. We should restrict possession of firearms by high-risk individuals, including those with criminal records, poor mental health, domestic violence convictions, or substance abuse issues, which requires uniform background checks across all 50 states. Also, the federal government needs to standardize gun education and licensing programs nationwide to prevent guns from falling into the wrong hands, and to ensure that all licensed gun owners know how to handle their weapons and how to respond under pressure.
Okay, and then our second position statement is from Jerry.
I just want to make a brief response to what she said. Gun education, I really like that point. I think I should research that more. Gun control is an important topic that sustains our rights to our foundations as a country. It's proven and held secure by being a core to our constitutional rights. I believe in the Second Amendment. Americans have the right to protect themselves. When it comes to gun violence, we have to talk about two problems. Inner city violence, which is a matter of gang violence. All the heavily gun-controlled areas, which is typically Democratic areas, these are the places where people are getting killed en masse. Then we have the mass shooting issue, which shows a direct correlation to mental health. The issue becomes severe in the 1960s and 1970s because this is an area, because they released mental ill people from facilities. They did basically a mass release of all these people. So when it comes to this instance, it's basically, once again, the Constitution. You cannot base public policy off of marginalized cases. Gun control, when it comes to mental health within the topic, it needs to be associated because no matter what, invariably, every mass shooting has shown an account to mental health. And taking my guns away from me or them isn't going to stop the mass shooter.
Alrighty, do either of the other panelists want to talk about it? Okay, Grant.
According to a Pew Global Research poll from 2013, over 85% of Americans support universal background checks, preventing the mentally ill people from getting guns in some sort of gun education programs.
Robert.
Well, first of all, the government is not going to come inside your home and take your guns away. Let's get that one out of the way. But I think, when we're talking about, every time when we talk about rights, people always feel like I have my right to do this. But with every single right, there's some kind of consequence that comes with the rights that we have. And so I think, when we're talking about rights, we also have to look at reality in the world we live in. Having semi-automatic or full automatic guns is not, what do you need that for? What are you going in a fight with the government or something? And so I think that there is a level of common sense that needs to be applied when it comes to owning guns and the kind of guns that people should own. And so I don't think it's a matter of we're taking your rights away. It's a matter of, based on the society that we live in today, there needs to be some type of restrictions on this right.
Jerry.
I don't really understand the notion of saying you're not taking rights away when you are taking the guns away from us, basically. You say you want tougher restrictions, but how are you going to enforce that? The logic behind this is that the government is doing well on this topic, which they are not. The government definitely sucks at this. I'm going to be a firm advocate of that. Background checks, I don't know if any of you are familiar, but do you truly know what the background checking is like in getting guns? I think you should take an actual interest into finding out how that goes, because it's not as simple as many mainstream media portrays.
Maya. Oh.
Then? All right. Thank you, Maya. So gun control is not about taking away your pistol and your hunting rifle, okay? Gun control is about taking away weapons that kill 50 people in under 2 minutes or less. All right? This is not an issue about whether you have the right to have a pistol in your home to protect yourself if somebody invades your house, or if you have the right to use a rifle to shoot a deer when you go hunting on the weekends, okay? This is an issue about protecting American lives from mass shootings.
Okay, Maya.
I also want to point out that what Jerry said about the marginalized cases where people misuse automatic and semi-automatic weapons, they're not misusing anything. That's what this gun is designed to do. It's designed to engage the enemy at a rapid rate of fire. Also, the argument that these weapons are good use for home invasions, defending yourself in the case of a home invasion or for going hunting, these rifles are really not designed for that. These rifles are extremely bulky, and for people who don't understand how to use them, trying to fire them in a small space like your house, you'll actually not be as effective as using a handgun. And for those who are going hunting, I read that people going hunting with these machine guns, basically, they don't know how to hunt. They just want to wield their gun like G.I. Joe. So.
Okay, Jerry, did you have something?
Okay, so you basically contradicted yourself when it came to house protection. You said earlier you said that these guns are basically being used what they're meant to be, which was killing the enemy. That's exactly the instance it would be in the sense of a home invasion type situation. I mean, I just was pointing out that you basically contradicted yourself within that. I definitely see the reason why gun restriction or, for instance, more stricter regulations on this is a good choice. But it comes down to the fundamental right that this is my right to bear arms, and I'll leave it there.
All right, Robert.
I think, let's get back to reality and common sense here. If we outlaw semi-automatic weapons, those whose intentions to use guns in a negative way, if they're trying to kill people, they'll be able to kill less people if they don't have full automatic or semi-automatic guns. And so I think the practical thing to do is here, if you need a pistol to protect yourself, fine, go ahead, but you don't need a full automatic thing to kill someone. You don't need to shoot someone 20 times to kill them. If you can shoot them in the right place, it will die. So.
Alrighty, so we are going to move on to our next category, which is going to be climate change. So the planet's average temperature has risen 2 degrees since the beginning of the 19th century, with 16 of the 17 warmest years on record occurring since 2001. This global warming is almost certainly caused by human activity. So the question is, what's the best way to reverse the effects of global warming? The first position statement comes from Jerry.
Climate change is a problem, but until a precise solution is established, it's impossible. If you could create a solution that did not hurt millions of people and plunge us back into the 16th century standard of living, then maybe we could talk about it. The problem is that nobody, even on the left, who are the biggest climate anthropogenic advocates, cannot tell you what we are supposed to do to stop climate change. Everything they are talking about is at the very least trimming around the edges. So if the carbon emissions have caused all this damage, then you need to dramatically scale back carbon emissions to the point that basically you stop driving cars. That you have to stop coal emissions that power all the energy in the country. Green energy is the biggest boondoggle that ever was, and solar energy is providing less than 4% of the nation's energy at this point, and we've invested billions and billions of dollars into it. So until we come up with something nearly as efficient, we're going to have to make a choice. Either we're going to have to let the market come up with something as efficient as carbon-based energy, which is going to take a little while, or we are going to take, if you take this problem as seriously as the left reports, then we are going to have to plunge people into the living standards of the third world. The climate change has always been changing. There has been global cooling periods and global warming periods historically. I'm not saying it's not happening. It may be happening. I'm happy to say it's happening. But unless you provide a solution, then we can't further.
All right, and our second position statement comes from Maya.
The scientific community is in full agreement that climate change is real, and the vast majority believes that humans are the direct cause. The Clean Air Act of 1963 sets emissions caps on industries, automobiles, and aircraft, and amendments in 1970, 77, and 90 added more detail to give the federal government more power to regulate emissions like tropospheric ozone and nitrogen oxides, which are carcinogens. The time has come for another amendment to this Clean Air Act, and it's time to set stricter guidelines on mining practices, particularly mountaintop removal, industry emissions, and fuel efficiency standards. Believe it or not, humans have extracted over half of the global oil supply already, and at the rate we're going, the world's going to run out of oil by the end of our lifetime. Climate change is a global issue requiring global action, such as re-signing the Paris Climate Accord, and the U.S. is currently the only country requesting withdrawal. But also, we need to engage in small efforts on state, community, and individual levels, because every person is responsible for climate change.
Alrighty, so either of the other panelists have anything they want to add? Robert.
The quick thing I wanted to add was that he talked about, how we have to be efficient with our approaches to climate change, and that, especially with job loss and whatnot. But all I want to say is that you won't have a job to lose if you don't have a planet to live on.
Okay, Grant.
So something I recently learned that Mr. Voschel told us was that climate change is not actually a political issue in a lot of other countries. In the UK for example, the Liberal and the Conservative parties both agree that climate change is a problem and that there needs to be government action to address it. In China, which only has one party, but there's still agreement that climate change is a problem. So it's really only here in America that we like to argue about the role of climate change on a partisan issue.
Jerry.
I'd like to actually say I think there's a reason for that, and it's basically because climate change is a luxury for the rich.
What do you mean by that exactly?
So basically, the simple fact is like, okay, let's say you're in Africa, for instance, and you're just trying to survive off of the land. Climate change is not going to be an instance to you. So for example, you're just going to burn whatever fossil fuels you can to keep your child alive at night. So when I say, for instance, the luxury of the rich, it's the issue is because we're concerned about it because we have a more how would you say, issue with it.
Maya.
I'd like to respond that actually people in countries such as the African countries and less developed nations actually suffer more from climate change than we do here in the United States. So when the temperatures rise in the summer and it gets over 100 degrees, who out here turns on your air conditioning? Which last I knew was run by electricity. And people in Africa don't have that luxury. So yeah, you're right. Climate change is a luxury for the rich. But who suffers from it? The rich or the people who don't have the means to pollute the environment with their air conditioning?
Robert.
Well, first, I just wanted to make the statement that Africa is a whole continent, and there's 54 or more countries in that continent, and so every country is different. I just wanted to make that off the bat. But I think Maya is exactly right on that. Those countries who are less developed and whatnot, those countries tend to suffer from climate change the worst because they don't have the resources that they have in order to escape some of these challenges that we deal with when climate change happens. And also, one of the things I would like to say, one of the things that we can do in those countries, which at this point, we're not able to do because Donald Trump signed us out of the Paris Climate Agreement, climate change accord, is that, we could bring renewable energy sources to those less developed countries to help them combat climate change. And so that's just one little point that I wanted to clarify on.
Grant.
Going back to the government's response to climate change, instead of fighting about who suffers most, the African people or the white people of the rest of the world, renewable energies provide lots of jobs for people. So here in Iowa, we have a booming wind energy. In Germany, they have a booming solar energy and other renewable energy. So renewable energy jobs provide a lot of jobs in this country. Turning to ethanol and other renewable fuels, in Iowa alone, that provided over 9,000 statewide jobs last year and $2.35 billion in GDP for the state of Iowa. So investing in those renewable fuels and investing in those types of jobs really does help the economy and is an effective way to combat climate change and global warming.
Maya.
Going back to the issue of that we were discussing earlier, I also wanted to point out that the people who are in these developing nations are the most disenfranchised from the fossil fuel trade. Developed nations discover oil and resources in developing nations. They exploit it, and then they leave the environmental damage to the locals to handle while they go find some other resource to exploit in another developing country. So the United States does have a global obligation to address climate change that it so greatly contributes to.
All right. Okay. Really, really quick.
Okay. I'll just really quick. Okay. So yeah, I agree. Climate change is definitely a problem, but what you're basically avoiding what I said, and what is the solution?
Okay. So, our final planned topic for the night is going to be about education. And there's a reason that we save this one for last. Education is often cited as the foundation of any meaningful change we want to make in the world. But after the failure of No Child Left Behind and controversy over Common Core standards, the debate about how to educate is still going strong. So, our first position statement comes from Robert.
So when it comes to education, one of the first things that I believe that we need to do is that we need to increase our education funding. Our schools are underfunded, and this trend of underfunding our schools will hurt the communities of underserved and underrepresented students the most. Our teachers should be paid more, and we need to invest more in computer science initiatives based off the technological needs of the future workforce. We need more equitable resources towards our underrepresented and underserved student populations, as in targeting funds to neediest kids. We need to ensure college and career readiness. Every student should be on a path to success after graduation. We need to reform discipline practices, especially towards students of color and underserved populations. We also need to reform teacher prep programs so that they may start bringing in teachers that fit the demographic of students that they are serving.
All right. And our second position statement comes from Grant.
I actually wanted to go before Robert because Robert's on the State Board of Education, so I feel like he should have gone last, so this way he doesn't make me look bad. But Robert is a very powerful advocate for education, so I want to thank you for that, Robert. On a local level, and actually coming from this very board room and this very chair, SRG does not work and School of Rigor does not work. There we go. Yes, you can clap. Thank you. All right. We have to fund education both from the or from the federal level and the state level, and we have to promote technical education and college choices for our 21st century economy. Local and state governments should set standards for school, not the national government. Thank you.
All right. Do any of the other panelists have anything they want to say? Cool. All right. So we'll get started with my first question. So talking about things like school choice, are school vouchers good for the public school system? Robert?
I think to some extent, vouchers, to some extent, they can be good can you repeat the question again? Sorry.
Yeah, sure. So I just said, are school vouchers good for the public school system?
I think when it comes to vouchers, I think one of the issues of vouchers is that sometimes they never always cover the full cost of tuition to whether it's, say, I'm going to a charter school, for example. And so I think those are one of the problems that we have with vouchers, and that, if I'm being given a voucher to attend a charter school, whatnot, and it can't cover the full tuition, that is an issue. And so I said there is some issues with it, but we should always explore different education opportunities if they're going to offer a student the best outcome possible.
Grant?
So I think that I agree that school vouchers are a great thing and that they can help some low-income families attend some more prestigious schools and some better schools. But I think that also leaves behind, what do you do with the public schools? Because if those students are going away from public schools, you're not fixing the problem at the public school level. So here at Central, we have a wonderful school program, and I think that that's something that we have to look at, is how do we change the school system to better enact student success and to better enable students for success both in the workforce, both if they go directly into that or if they go off to college.
Okay, Robert?
I fully agree with what Grant said, and I think the problem is that a lot of times we look at charter schools and we see, especially like private schools, where a lot of times you tend to see the students are doing a lot better than those students in public schools. And I think that the thing that we should be doing is not to try to move towards sending more kids to private schools or to charter schools, is that we should try to see what are some of the things that they're doing in those charter schools or private schools that are working for those students, and how can we implement those same policies into public schools? Is it the flexibility that we need to give to some schools, some buildings? If that's the thing that we need to do, let's try that out. And so I think that it should be a learning thing, that because charter schools are here to stay, private schools are here to stay. It's not something that we can just say, it's not going to happen. It is going to happen. And so I think the thing that we should try to do is, how can we work with each other? How can we take ideas from private schools and charter schools that are working well for their students? How can we try to apply those same ideas into public school, into the public school system, in order to benefit those students as well?
Okay, so my next question is something that Grant sort of touched on, but the question I'm going to ask. So what's the best way to support public schools in the United States? Yeah, Robert, go ahead.
One of the ways we can start is more funding. I think, obviously, just because you're putting more money into education doesn't necessarily mean the students are going to perform better. But one thing we do know is that if you look at kids who live in communities that are well off to do in terms of income and whatnot, those kids tend to perform well. And so to some extent, there is some correlation with students who are coming from a community that is well off economically and how they perform in terms of achievement and whatnot. So in that sense, we do have to look at increasing the education fund so that we can allow students and schools to have the resources that they need to offer to those students who don't have those resources. And so education funding is one of the ways, and also teacher prep programs. I think one of the issues that we have is that the demographic of teachers does not fit the demographics of students that they are teaching. And so teacher prep programs need to be reformed so that the teachers may reflect the demographic of students that they are teaching.
Maya.
I'd also like to add in, I totally agree what you were saying about increasing funding for education. I believe we also, on a local and state level, need to outline how these funds should be spent once the schools have these funds at their disposal. For example, I know Roosevelt spent lots of money on fancy television monitors in the lobby when we could have been spending that money to bolster our arts programs or our sports programs or providing more teacher training and sending our teachers off to national seminars to better their teaching tactics to focus on students who have different learning styles.
Grant.
Just to give you some numbers, in 2016, Iowa got over $95 million from the Department of Education, which is less money than we sent to them through our taxes. So we actually got less money back from the Department of Education than we gave them. And in 2016, there was $8,874 spent per student at a public school from the Iowa legislature. And so that's around 480,000 public school students. So we definitely have to increase the funding. We have to support these schools, but we also have to have smart funding, and we have to have funding that actually goes to programs that support students and support learning.
Jerry.
I agree with more funding. It's just such a great idea. I mean, school education really boils down to these are the people that are enlightening our next great minds of our generations, and that should be our topmost priority.
Okay, if Robert wants to say something really quick.
I think another thing I forgot to touch on is that we should also focus on equity. I think we also know that there are certain students, with certain demographic of students who are not getting full access to high quality education. Just look at Central Academy, for example. The kind of education that we're getting is, I would say, very high quality. There are students within the district who are not getting that same amount of high quality education. And so we also have to look at equity and the kind of quality of education that we offer to our students.
Okay, cool. And with that, that is the end of the moderated portion of the forum. We're going to take like a really quick, 1 to 2 minute break just so I can get the audience questions that have been sent in. And then we're going to get started on those. Alrighty, so we also just decided that since everyone in the audience has been so great so far, that we're gonna allow a little audience response if you feel like it's necessary, especially since these are your questions. So the questions, there are a lot of questions, and I will try to get to as many as I can. What I really want to cover are things that we didn't get covered during the forum, either under specific topics or general miscellaneous topics that we just didn't have time to cover. So most of them are going to be generalized. If there are any specific ones, I'll ask those too, but I'll just try to get through as many as I can. And so then anyone can answer the question, unless it's directed at a specific person, and it's going to be the same rules of recency and whoever went last gets to go, things like that. So the first question that came in was, start with this one. Considering the famine crisis in Yemen, what responsibility does the United States have to provide humanitarian aid? Yeah. Considering the famine crisis in Yemen, what responsibility does the United States have to provide humanitarian aid? Robert.
I think that the U.S. should start by looking at what ways could we work with the United Nations. So those multiple government organizations, those supranational organizations. Rochelle, I knew. I just couldn't think of it right now. I think that's the route that we need to go and look at how we can partner up with other countries to provide the support that we need to support to Yemen. Yep.
Grant.
We have the most powerful economy in the world. We are the top economy in the world. And so I think that we have a responsibility to help poorer countries, that we have a responsibility to help these people.
Okay. Jerry.
I really like the point that Robert brought up through United Nations. I feel as though we should be able to, whatever we can do, we should be able to do. Thank you.
Okay, cool. So the next question is about gun control. So how does the NRA impact the discussion of gun control in Congress? Jerry.
My opinions on the NRA are, I've always really thought they were a great asset to the topic of gun control. They've never really been in any situation where they're deemed how would you say, corrupt. They're always there. The reason why they're actually so powerful is because they have so many members. That's really where their power stems from. And when it comes to those things, that's all I can say.
Robert.
First of all, I think that it's interesting that I think America is probably the only country in the world that actually has a gun lobbyist interest group, and so that's a testament within itself. But I think why the NRA is good for those Second Amenders, whatever you want to call them, those people who love their guns, why I think it is a good thing. I think the problem comes when members of Congress cannot vote on the best interests of the American public when it comes to common sense gun control laws. And I think that's the problem with the NRA, is that sometimes those in Congress do not vote on the best interests of Americans. They vote on the best interests of the NRA.
Okay, Maya.
Well, first of all, the NRA has like lots of money, so that means lots of power and lobbyists and like lobbying capabilities. I think that they've lost sight of what their purpose used to be. They used to advocate for gun safety and gun education, and now they've swung so far right that they've basically stained their name and lost a lot of respect from certain people who may or may not be members of the NRA. And so I think that to gain some more of that respect back, I would say that they should shift some of their rhetoric towards promoting gun safety and gun education, and not necessarily, I don't remember what I was going to say.
Okay, Jerry.
I feel as though the statement that says they've lost their way of where they truly are is not sound. I mean, maybe that could be the instance for like a certain amount of members. Once again, back to marginalized cases. I don't feel that represents who they are as a whole. They are powerful, and they are there because it's their constitutional right.
Okay, cool. So the next question is about climate change. So climate change has initiated an environmental disaster in the ocean. Rising ocean temperatures, acidification, and loss of marine biodiversity all contribute to a declining marine ecosystem we depend on. What steps should the U.S. take to remedy this issue? Jerry.
That's always been my question when it comes to climate change, like what steps are we going to take? And I'd love to hear some opinions from Maya or Robert or even Grant on this issue. I'm just curious. Thank you.
Yeah, Grant.
Like I said in the actual form, we have to invest in clean energy and renewable fuels. And we also have to continue to take practices that reinvent the manufacturing process so that we can cut carbon dioxide emissions and other pollutant emissions. And the true way to combat climate change is through our economy. It's not through destroying our economy. It is through modernizing our economy and making it a 21st century economy.
Robert.
Well, I just want to say that, Jerry, I think most Americans love fish. And so I think we shouldn't just keep asking, what can we do? What can we do? What are you going to do? As if there's not any solution. I think we should all work together, regardless of party, to try to find these solutions, like, going towards an economy that is heavily funded by renewable energy sources. I don't know why you'd be opposed to something like that.
Maya.
I think that an important step in, starting this gigantic process that we have of addressing all areas of climate change, including the rising ocean tides, the rising temperatures, the increasing salinity of the oceans, is to take part in these international pacts like the Paris Climate Accord and take the Montreal Protocol, for example, the international agreement to lower the use of ozone-damaging CFCs or chlorofluorocarbons that's in your hairspray. All 193 UN members states have ratified this protocol, and since then, the ozone layer, the ozone hole over Antarctica is projected to return to the 1980s level by 2050 by 2050 to 2070. Sorry, and so I just don't understand why we need to withdraw from this climate accord that we agreed to. I'm sure Jerry has an opinion.
Grant.
I just really want to quickly piggyback on what Maya said, and that we need continued education on the pollutants that our shampoos and body washes, for example, have in them. And so we need continued education also on like our fuels and how those pollute, and we need continued reform and scientific investigation into those.
Jerry.
So my comment on this is basically what you were talking about, the Paris Treaty. Okay, so what the Paris Treaty basically does is says, oh, here's what we're going to do. We're going to give money funded directly from the United States to go to China and go to India to basically let's preserve the environment. But it never really states that they have to pertain to a certain regulation, that they have to meet a certain requirement. It's basically saying, oh, we're going to give them money and we hope that they do something with the climate. And that's my main problem with the treaty. It's not climate change. I recognize that as a problem, and I'm all for that. But when it comes to hurting our economy at the sake of other economies to save the earth, it's just not really sound, in my opinion.
Robert.
I just want to say, whenever you have an issue within some type of agreement, the thing to do is not to just pull away from that agreement. It's to be able to try to, sit down with those other nations whom you have that agreement with and say, well, maybe there's some issues and some provisions of this agreement that we need to take a look at. And so I think that pulling out of their agreement was just a bad choice and more like a childish decision instead of trying to say, let's come to the table, let's fix the provisions which think that are not at America's best interest. And that's what Donald Trump should have done.
Okay. We're going to switch gears just a little bit. Okay, unless Maya wants to say something really quick. Yeah, that's fine.
Oh, I just wanted to say that the reason that the Paris Climate Accords are so open-ended, their main goal is to keep the level of global warming to at least or below 2 degrees Celsius within the next, I think it's 100 years. And the reason they offer so much flexibility is so economies can, give what you have. And so I read that China, under this plan, China would spend more money than the U.S. would. And I'd like to point out that basically the spending, like how much you spend is correlated to how much environmental damage your country does, because our economy is huge. And through a huge economy, we have to have overseas production, I kind of lost my train of thought. But anyways, yeah, it's gone.
Okay. Alrighty. Well, we'll switch gears a little bit. So this is under the labor issues, sort of a different topic that we didn't get a chance to cover. If anything, what should be done about the existing wage gap? Robert.
I think we kind of already touched on it, and I think the best way is, you said wage gap, right?
Yeah.
Increase it. I mean, minimum wage, sorry. I'm sorry. It's been a long night, y'all. Sorry, with the wage gap, I think what we should do is increase the minimum wage. I think that's one way where we can start with this whole debate. I'm sorry, it's been a long night. But yeah, I think we should start by increasing the minimum wage, and that will at least start fixing some of the disparities within levels of income that different American families have.
Okay. So should military spending be increased, and why or why not? Jerry.
Military spending should always be increased for the simple fact that we have to keep at the head of technology. Many of our technology within the military spending budget, many of our military capabilities of today are basically back from the Cold War. They're breaking down. These facilities need to be funded more so we can keep our basically superpower as the United States in the world.
Robert?
I think when talking about military spending, I think we also have to be careful with that. At what cost are we going to increase our military spending? Is it that we're going to lower our spending within education or within, like climate change and whatnot? And so we always have to look at what cost are we going to increase our military spending. And so while I believe that there's probably, parts of the military that need some re-innovation, I think that we should also look at how much we're going to spend with the spending and look at other levels of spending. So we shouldn't just increase the military just because we're going to have more bigger weapons and whatnot. We should always think about how that's going to affect other parts of our federal government and its budget.
Maya?
Correct me if I'm wrong, but I believe military is currently one of the largest areas of government spending right now. And tonight we've talked about many issues that require our funding, like education or climate change or immigration system. And we also discussed how maybe military intervention isn't the greatest asset that we have right now to deal with issues of national security. So I'm questioning, why do we need to continue to increase the military spending that I mean, we already spend a whole lot of money on when we've discussed how military intervention isn't necessarily the best route to take.
Okay, Jerry.
Well, like you did say, yeah, there have been topics tonight that we have discussed that involve this matter. For instance, Russia and North Korea. And as I pretty much said, we should always use military as a force. Yes, diplomatic must come first, and I'm all for that. But when it comes to actually resolving such conflicts, it's going to be with military. And to be sure that we have the best and upkeep facility, we need more money. Thank you.
Grant.
We have the strongest military in the world, and it's because we fund it very effectively, and we fund it with large quantities of money. I don't think it's that the military needs more money. It's that we need to revamp our military, and that can be found within the current military budget. The military doesn't need more money to change itself. The military just needs to look at policies and look at practices and look at new technology that they can currently change and that they can currently invest in with the current budget they have. We spend more on our military than like 26. We are so far ahead of other countries in our military spending. It's kind of insane how much we spend compared to other countries. So it's not that our military is underfunded or anything. It's that they don't necessarily need more funding. They just need new practices.
Okay, Robert, and then we're going to move on from this topic.
So I think when we're talking about military spending, one of the things that we also have to talk about is the way in which the money that we're giving to the military is being spent. So while a lot of times we talk about smart spending within our schools and whatnot, we also have to talk about smart spending within our military. I don't know when it was, but I read an article where they were talking about how the Pentagon lost a sum of money and they don't know how they lost that money. So we also have to look at the way in which money in the military is being spent and not just about increasing the spending for military.
Okay, cool. So we're going to move on to a couple of directed questions at specific people that were based on things that were said during the forum. And so this goes all the way back to the very beginning, and it's a question for Jerry. Why do you think African Americans statistically commit more crimes? What do you think the root of what do you think the root of it is?
You see, this really results to basically systematic oppression. And I've never been in denial of systematic oppression and the root of where it causes from. And that's always been the issue. Yeah, there is an oppression within the African American community. And this can be a possibility that will drive them to these crime rates. But you can't blame everything on systematic oppression, as simple as that. You can't be like, oh, I'm going to go kill someone because I'm systematically oppressed. That's just not the right way as human beings to act. And that's where that really comes from.
Okay, Robert, you can say something if you want.
I don't know if any black person says I'm gonna go kill another black person because I'm systematically oppressed. I've never heard of that cases. But here's the thing. Here's one thing we got to know. We know that the communities in America are still in some way, shape, or form still segregated. Blacks tend to live among other black folks, among other people of color, and so common sense or reality just tells you that the people whom you live close to are the people whom you're probably going to commit a crime against most likely. But the thing is, systematic oppression is definitely at the root of why the murder rates and black communities are the way that they are. We look at policies such as redlining that just disparaged African Americans from receiving the kind of opportunities and the kind of help that they need to receive from the government, and that just brought them into this sort of these ghettos. Like when you look at Chicago, people in Chicago are in high poor concentration of poor communities in Chicago, and so if you have economic depravity, where you can't make ends meet, you have to go through other means to provide for your family. And at times, it may mean that you're doing something illegal. And so I say that systematic oppression is at the root of murder, of crimes being committed within the black community. And we can't dispute that and think that black people just one day woke up and said, we're going to start shooting each other.
Okay, so the next question is about gun control, and it's specifically for Grant. So how would guns be banned? Would they be stripped from citizens? Is that possible?
I don't think there's an infrastructure, so to speak, or a government program that could walk into your home and take your guns. It would really have to be on a case-by-case basis, which is a lot of paperwork, a lot of warrants, a lot of lawyers, a lot of court, and a lot of government spending. So if you were to, I think that the real root of the problem here is the distribution and the manufacturing process. And so that is where the real government regulation has to come in, and it has to come in at that level. The government's not going to walk into your home and demand to take your assault rifle, okay? That's really not practical unless there are warrants and there is extreme cases where people are complaining about those sorts of people. So I hope I answered your question.
Yeah, you can answer.
So, so this isn't necessarily a solution to. Oh wait, remind me what the question was. Yeah. Sorry. I just want to
It's
make sure
good.
that I'm answering this correctly.
It's good to know. How would guns be banned? Would they be stripped from citizens? Is that possible?
Okay, so here's what Australia did when Australia banned semi-automatic and automatic weapons. What they did was they offered a buyback program for their banned weapons and bump stocks. They offered amnesty to those who turned in their illegal weapon or the weapons that they got illegally, and then they destroyed all the seized weapons, which were, I think, 650,000. As a result, suicides by gun fell by 57%, and then homicide by gun fell by 47%. So that could be a model that we could use to build our own sort of gun regulation, or at least some steps to getting guns out of the wrong hands.
Jerry.
Yeah, and that's great for Australia, but we're the United States of America, and it's not really as simple as what Australia did. It takes much more steps, and I feel as though that should be noted. So, like in other instances or cases or scenarios, people always say, "Oh, you can look at these other countries and what they do so great is, and we should like copy that or like try to implement it into our society." Yes, we can take steps, but the overall problem is basically gun control, our Second Amendment, our Constitution, who we are as people, patriotism.
Okay. And so we're sort of entering the home stretch of the forum. So there are a couple questions that are sort of about, like in a meta way a little bit, like about the forum as a whole and about politics in general. So I want to get to some of those. So the first one is, how should we approach the current disdain towards politics and this country in general in this current generation? Grant can go first.
All right. This is something I'm really passionate about. As you can see, I organized this whole thing. So I think stuff like this is the solution to politics in America. As Ms. Miller always said, if we can't listen to each other and we can't communicate with each other and we can't talk to each other, we can't accomplish anything. So we really have to come together, understand that we are all different. But I think that I learned that I agree with Maya, and I agree with Robert, and I agree with Jerry on a lot of stuff that we talked about tonight. And I also disagreed with them on a lot of things that we talked about. So it's about us understanding that and working together, not fighting between Republicans and Democrats and between party loyalty, but working together for solutions that work for America.
All right. Next is Robert.
I agree with what Grant said, but I think there's a part of why we see some type of rhetoric and some type of divide within the political spectrum is that at times politics is personal, and a lot of times when politicians pass laws, they forget that there's people being affected by those laws and policies that they pass. I remember just about 2 weeks ago, a classmate of mine, they came in front of the class and they told us a story about how last week when they went home, their mother had just told him that his stepdad had just been deported and how much his stepdad meant so much to him. And so when I see the ways in which some policies passed by President Trump or any other politician and the way in which they affect people that I know personally, there are times where if we start discussing about an issue, I might get a little bit more personal, might get a little bit more emotional, just because I've seen as to how those policies affect a person on a personal level. And so I think we can always try to have a civil discourse like we did here. Nobody gave each other punches, even if they would have thought of doing so. I just wanted to add. But I think we can have this civil conversation, but I think we also, when you talk to a person, you also have to understand as to why they might be more passionate about an issue. How does that issue affect them on a personal level? And so the way in which you approach them to talk to them about that issue, you should always think about it. It's not about what you're saying, it's how you say it. And maybe you may say something with the best intention, but how it affects a person may be totally different than the way you intended. So politics is tricky. We should always try to have civil discourse, but think about how policies affect people on a personal level.
All right, next to answer this question is Maya.
I have to totally second everything that Robert just said. And I believe that politics have become extremely emotionalized these days. And that's not necessarily a bad thing. But when I feel like I can't have a civil conversation with my friend over the latest policy that's going through Congress without feeling attacked by her or feeling like I need to defend my own position, then that's not a healthy environment to discuss politics. Honestly, in preparing for this forum, I had to keep reminding myself, this is a discussion. This is not a debate. I don't have to defend my own arguments because they're not going to be attacking my arguments. They're going to be presenting their opinions, their beliefs, and that's fine because we can coexist. I mean, my beliefs can exist, Jerry's beliefs can exist, theirs can too. And they're not mutually exclusive. Like, it's not me or them. And you see a lot of the me or them in our society these days. And if we can distance ourselves from that feeling of needing to attack someone else's ideas or defend our own, then we can definitely take steps to engage in more civil discourse and understand where people are coming from. But we need to put down those walls of, I need to protect my opinion because what if someone tries to kill it?
And finally, Jerry.
Wow, what a lot to live up to. Those were all magnificent, and I'll say amen to that. I love all that. Thank you so much. Okay, so where I really want to go with this is I feel as though the next problem in the United States within politics is basically political tribalism, which is how you would say, oh, this is my party. I have to believe with everything they say. I have to agree. I have to support Trump because I'm a Republican. And it's not like that. That when we put that view on politics, it's only going to be the destruction of a democracy, a destruction of the people, of who we are. And I personally, as a person, I know many people probably don't like my opinions, and I understand that. And I love having conversations. That's one thing I really like. I love hearing people's opinions, what they think of me, what they want to say to me. But when you're attacking me as a person, I don't really appreciate that. I am always down to just sit down and have a civil discussion on our opinions, and I'll hear you out. And I understand basically where a lot of the liberal ideology, the democratic stances come from. Like I used to be. Believe it or not, I actually used to be a Democrat, a hard Democrat for the first 10 years of my life. Yeah, I know, right, guys? I know. And I mean, definitely, I've changed. I've changed a lot. And whenever it comes, I just feel as though compromise is going to be the biggest word within politics within the next 10 years here. Trump, maybe if you see this, compromise, man. Can you please just compromise? Hear him out. Don't always call the little man a little man, just keep it to yourself. That's what I want to leave it at. Thank you, guys.
All right, now that officially brings us to the end of our 2017 Unity Through Diversity Forum. Before we go, I just want to give special thanks to a couple of people. First of all, Lorena, who is our wonderful communications director. Next, Sophia, who is the timekeeper and made sure that everyone stayed under time. Next, I want to thank Mr. Coleman's class, who provided the filming that you've been seeing up on the screens and who is going to provide a link to this entire thing that Central Academy is going to tweet out, and just their ability to make that happen, I guess, was really cool. Next is going to, we'll clap for all of them. We want to thank the school board for giving us the ability to use this space because it's really cool and, the gavel's cool. We want to thank Mr. Voschel and the research teams that he led, because that's where we really got all of our statistics and had the evidence to back it up. Next, I want to thank the media who came and who sort of projected this event. First of all, KCCI came tonight. The Des Moines Register wrote a story about it, and WHO had Robert and Grant on Friday to talk about it. So I just want to thank all of them for giving us the exposure that we really needed to make this a success. I want to thank Superintendent Ahart for being a huge supporter of this event and giving us every resource we could possibly need to make it happen. Yeah. And then finally, I want to thank Dr. Gogarty for really being the leader for this and giving us every opportunity we possibly needed from the very beginning. It really wouldn't have happened without her. So.
All right, let's give it up for Ellie, who did such a fantastic job tonight. All right, that's all we got, so you're free to go.
Thank you for coming.